Sheriff's Department believe the most likely committed suicide. They jumped right to the suicide. Family members did not believe that John would commit suicide because he was so close to his daughter, Chloe. His brother is quoted, "I never believed it for a minute. The guy had too much pride," said his nephew, "and I'd put that on the back burner and rule it out," Scott Griff's a close friend who frequently went on ride-alongs with John. Felt the deputy simply had no reason to kill himself. I mean, he had a zest for life. He recalled how his friend seemed happy about the new relationship he was starting with Davida. So now that's where you can start twisting about maybe he's not going to kill himself, but he is just done with his current marriage. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but his coldness and the things he's doing are more pointed towards maybe he's just done with his wife and he's giving those things away to cut ties with that, but then he's giving his necklace to his potential future father-in-law, and you know, trying to move on with this other person.
I
so
think
there's that.
I mean, yeah, I guess you could say that, you know, friends think he had a zest for life, but I still go back to, you know, instant like holding a loaded gun to your head driving down the freeway. That's not somebody that has a zest for life. That's somebody that I think has a mental condition.
Yep, and devil's advocate, and going along with what you're saying too, it reminds me also of when you hear people that threaten to commit suicide are not typically the ones who do it, it's the ones who you never suspect would potentially do it. And it's another sad, true aspect of that when sometimes people are not well, they don't show signs of it, or they're very minute signs or things like that. So there's still, I'd say it's not off the table,
Yeah.
you know, based on the evidence of witnesses, of what a witness heard. But still what baffles me, and I don't want to get too far, but if he did commit suicide along the trail, why didn't they find him?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, unless he committed suicide by like jumping into a ravine or a crevasse or something, you would assume that he would have committed suicide in a fashion that would have left his body discoverable, because usually they leave a note.
And you look at the gunshot. If it's the gunshot and he did that, there would be all the things that happen when you shoot yourself. And it's not like you can hide that stuff. And they were searching for him within hours, and they had dogs out and things like that. So there's that. I'll leave it at that, and we'll keep moving on because there's a lot more other stuff that's going to start happening here.
Okay.
So there was a theory that Jonathan had been killed by a fellow deputy as part of a plan to hush up links to the meth world. The Los Angeles Sheriff's Special Enforcement Bureau had been embroiled in a long legal case and investigation relating to corruption involving meth production and trafficking. There were rumors circulating within Antelope Valley stations that deputies were warning meth players of pending drug busts. In the early 1990s, a 5-year internal investigation led to the indictment of 35 deputies who'd stolen millions of dollars from drug dealers. FBI video surveillance captured a sergeant and 2 narcotics detectives taking $30,000 from a drug dealer's hotel room. A detective assigned to the elite narcotics team was arrested for hiding $150,000 stolen by a colleague. So you're starting to get into that corrupt cop type stuff.
Yeah.
And it started to change the narrative of what possibly could have happened.
Now that, to me, is very believable. You've seen this play out in a lot of big cities across the country. I think of the
Training Day?
The movies, but I mean, even actual documentaries. I can't remember the name of it now, but it follows these cops in New York City, I think in the 80s, and similar kind of stuff. They would steal money off of, you know, criminals during arrests. They were selling drugs and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And so I can definitely see something like that being one possible theory to what happened to him. He got mixed up with the wrong people, and maybe he went to meet someone in, you know, the Punchbowl, and things went south, and now he's, you know, missing.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep going. Don't sew it shut just yet, Mike. You're going to hear a lot more information than
Okay.
And then I want to get a raw read from you before I tell you what I think. So,
all right.
A few days after John vanished, a woman linked to the Antelope Valley's outlaw bikers called the sheriff's department to report she'd heard that John had come across a meth lab and was taken care of, quote unquote. Then a tip came in from an informant who said a biker dealer claimed that after the deputy discovered something on his jog, he was going to be a hero and was taken care of before being put in a hole.
Okay.
Separate investigations by the FBI, by a sheriff's homicide detective, and the Operation Silent Thunder Drug Task Force, which John had been a part of, turned up similar intelligence. Years later, John's former boss, Mike Bauer, began to suspect that a different deputy, someone who's now retired, had murdered John. There were plenty of stories, but none were confirmed. A woman claimed to know where his body was buried, and a man contacted a task force saying he was present when the deputy was murdered. A third person reported seeing John return to his truck in the Devil's Punchbowl parking lot at dusk before walking back out with his backpack in the direction of two armed bikers. The witness then heard screaming. Deputy Randall Herbert, I'm going to butcher this name now, Herberly, I think that's what it is, insists that when he arrived at the Punchbowl after John was reported missing, he spotted a snub-nosed .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver on the center console of the truck. And he's quoted, "No deputy back then would leave their gun visible. The chance that a passerby might see it, break into the vehicle, and use the gun to commit a crime was too high. It's not just a red flag," he says. It's full-on fireworks. 4th of July. He says he reported the gun to the others on the site, but the official missing persons flyers stated that John was likely carrying the gun. "My recollection is that we could not account for his 2-inch revolver," says Dave Sauer, the sergeant who led the search. Now, this is where the story and conspiracy gets crazy. It's I know there's I just threw so much information at you. We're going to come back to it, but actually no, let's recap now because I'm going to get into some other stuff that's later. So it looked like clear-cut suicide.
Yeah.
Then with a couple more things of information, it looks like he might be entangled in some underground stuff and got caught up doing bad cop stuff.
Yeah.
Then new information comes that makes it seem like he actually was a good cop and potentially got killed by either meth lab people, bikers, or bad cops for trying to out bad cops.
Yeah.
So I like to always pretend that the people on our show are good people. So right now, I like the idea that he was going to make some big bust and he's a super cop like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson from Baywatch, even though he's not a cop, but he wanted to be one.
Yeah.
Or he's acting like one. And he's going to go take care of this because he's a badass. You know, he's special forces. He fights off bears, and it just didn't work out for him. So we're gonna stop there.
Okay.
Do you have any comments before we go forward?
No, I at first I was leaning towards suicide, and then as you were talking about, maybe another deputy killed him. He was entangled in, the meth underworld. That seemed pretty plausible, but I like the good guy. He was a good guy that was in the wrong spot at the wrong time, similar to our first case.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that brings us right back to episode 1 with Paul.
Yeah.
So, as I said, this is where the story and conspiracy gets a little crazier. In May of 2018, now we're later in the year, Darren Hager, a deputy with Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, received a jury award of $4.5 million upon their finding that Hager was wrongfully terminated in retaliation for looking too closely into this disappearance. In December of 1999, Hager arrested a man who offered to become an informant against 5 major methamphetamine manufacturers and distributors in the Antelope Valley. He not only provided leads for ongoing drug investigations, he reported a rumor that a certain deputy was involved in John's disappearance. Then in January of 2000, LASD homicide detective received permission to reopen the case, and after 3 months of investigation, he concluded that another deputy was involved in the drug trade and was a prime suspect in the murder of John. Allegedly, the homicide captain refused to authorize a search warrant, took the detective off the case, and threatened to terminate the detective if he continued with that case. So in March of 2000, a joint narcotics task force was formed targeting the major meth dealers in the Antelope Valley. Hager was the LASD member of the DEA task force. Now, this is the guy who later on, in 2018, so just a few years ago, was awarded that $4.5 million for being terminated for all this. The then Assistant Sheriff Larry Waldy ordered Hager to investigate the narcotics with the DEA, but to only document, not to investigate any information obtained on John or any corrupt deputies, which was to be later turned over to Homicide or the LASD Internal Criminal Investigation Bureau. Hager considered the DEA task force investigation an enormous success. The 11th month investigation led to 290 state arrests and 32 federal convictions for narcotics manufacturing and trafficking. And as he was instructed, Hager said he turned over the information he obtained relating to John and any corrupt deputies to his lieutenant, who transmitted it up the chain of command. Hager said he was then subject to an 11th month investigation by Internal Affairs Bureau, which he contended was retaliation for reporting the information about corrupt deputies. On July 28, 2003, he was terminated from his job. Hager then filed a lawsuit with the LA County Superior Court against the Sheriff's Department and the county for retaliation and wrongful termination. He argued that since he was hired in February of 1998, he was rated outstanding for his last 3 reviews in 99, 2000, 2001, and in 2002 he went to Washington, D.C. to be presented with the DEA's Administrator Award for his work on the task force, and that such termination was improper. After his termination, Hager said he was unable to find work because of the nature of the charges made against him: reckless investigation, disobeying orders, and making false statements to his superiors. The defense argued that John committed suicide and that the supposed corrupt deputies involved in the death was disproven by the February to April 2001 homicide investigation of John's disappearance. The defense also contended that Hager falsely misrepresented and reported information to superiors that was allegedly obtained from both informants and federal wiretaps about the claimed corrupt deputy. Now the jury, as we know, returned the verdict in favor of Hager, awarding him $806,000 for past lost earnings, $1.2 million for future lost earnings, and $2.5 million for non-economic damages, totaling to $4.5 million. So this screams deep state cover-up at the highest level in California law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, that's it could be a possible theory.
So that's the information I have. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay, well, like we do with every case, I kind of going through the most likely.
Do we think it was animal attack?
I do not think it was animal attack. That area doesn't have any predators that are going to kill someone of John's skill.
Yeah, not John. Not John.
So I don't think it's animal attack. I think a possibility is he had an accident, fell. That would be, I guess, unlikely because he wasn't going out there to hike that day. He was going out to run.
Yep.
So he was staying on the trail. He wasn't going to be, free climbing or anything like that. So there's no reason to expect that he was off the trail kind of bushwhacking around and he fell somewhere. So is it possible? Yes. Likely, probably not. I think suicide is a possible theory. The way he was acting with, holding the gun to his head and kind of the look in his eyes, and, sounds like he's been going through, trouble with his marriage. He's giving away all of his stuff. I think suicide is a very possible theory, but I think it's also unlikely in the sense that they didn't find his body. Most of the suicides we've read about in, people that go out in the woods and commit suicide, they do it in an area where they're going to be found because they leave a suicide note, and they're gonna find the person if they do that.
Yep. No, I totally agree.
So again, is suicide likely? I think it could be the way he was acting, but in this case, I don't know if that's what he was doing. I mean, maybe he was giving away his stuff because he was just going to disappear himself and move somewhere else. But so I think that's a possible theory. I definitely could see him being involved in maybe the drug underworld, and something went haywire and he was killed by another dirty cop. I mean, how many movies are there about that? Training Day. There's another good one that I watched.
And a lot of them are based off of, not obviously exactly how it happened, but they're based on true events or true stories of actual people.
Yeah. So a lot of those movies are, loosely based on real events that have happened in the world. And to be honest, a while back, I can't remember the name of the book now, but I read a book about how the federal government, or certain agents in the federal government, were literally shipping narcotics up from South America through Air Force bases in Texas into Southern California.
And they were giving away fully automatic weapons to drug cartel members and tracking them, but then they forgot to track them. Remember that? So they just gave weapons away. So I mean, it spans all types of administrations, from top federal down to local. There's all tons of stories of that happening.
Yeah, I think it wasn't Iran Contra. It was the federal government, and this is all allegedly. Obviously, nothing, I don't think, ever will come out, definitively proving this happened. But back in the 80s, allegedly, certain elements of the federal government were selling narcotics in Southern California to fund revolutions down in South America. And this spanned all various departments of law enforcement, and really fascinating book. But so getting back to the case, I think it's definitely possible that he was tied up in some kind of, bunch of dirty cops are, selling drugs, or, taking bribes to give safe passage to drug dealers. So that went to, surprise me at all. And kind of your final theory that it's more deep state than just a couple dirty cops, that maybe the whole department's infected with people that are, dirty, and you've got these, detectives trying to do investigations and they're getting shut down by their superiors. That's happened in real life.
Yep.
A lot of cops have gone to jail because of doing that very thing. So it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that he went to the Punchbowl to meet some of these cops and they got rid of him because he was becoming too big of a problem, or he's about to go public with something, or who knows. So I like those, I'm on the train of either he was a dirty cop and something went south, or he was a good guy and discovered too much and they took him out.
So I'm going to blow right past all those other ones that you said, because I agree with you. No animal. Yep. I do not think suicide. No. I think he was acting goofy. I think acting goofy could be attributed to him either coming to terms. So I'm going to go two routes here. Either he's an accomplice of some nefarious things, meaning he started to grow a conscience at some point, started giving things away, knowing that something bad could have happened, and he was going to blow the lid open, and they took care of him. Yeah. Or it's true deep state type stuff, and there's the double edge of this. So it's either deep state stuff and they took care of him because he was getting onto it and he was being super cop and trying to end all the corruption, and they're not going to allow that to happen. Yeah. And then this other guy, Hager, was lucky enough that he didn't get offed when he started reporting all that stuff. They just tried destroying his reputation, but it sounds very obvious that this guy had all these commendations. He did such a great job. And then as soon as he turns in all this information on corruption in the LAPD, all of a sudden he's getting all these, well, he's a terrible person. He lies. He does all this crap. It's very clear that's bull. Yeah. And obviously the jury thought so as well by awarding him $4.5 million in 2018. But now if I'm going to go Hollywood on this,
Please
it could also be that he is now in a witness protection program, and he is helping to continue to uncover all this stuff. Yeah. And his death was faked so that he could do this, because honestly, and this is where I don't even want to say it's too much Hollywood, and that does sound like a script to a movie. If you have corruption in the LAPD going up the chain that high, that's no longer a local issue. That is a federal big deal, like Department of Justice type stuff. And if this guy reached out to the right people, now, and why I think that is because he was in Special Forces, the military. So he's got contacts that are higher up in the federal level. So if he's seeing something going on and he needs to take care of it, all the things he was doing was not necessarily suicide flags. They were, I'm going to be gone flags. Yeah. And he knew he was going to be gone. And that's the one thing, because if someone thought he was getting too close and followed him out there and did him in at the end of the night,
Yeah.
that's unprepared. But he seemed to be prepared to be gone.
That's a good point.
And that's what tripped me, because I thought about this quite a bit, because like you can point to any of those things,
Yeah.
but when you look at everything together, if he's acting suicidal, sounds suicidal, it's either because he's suicidal or something else bigger is happening. Okay,
Yep.
So that means he's not going to be surprised, because he's basically preparing for something to happen. So he's either preparing for something bad to happen, or he knows what's going to happen, and he's setting up his loved ones in the best way he can without tipping them off, because he knows they're going to be interviewed. He knows that they're going to be questioned by the corrupt deputies and cops that he's going to be indicting potentially.
So basically, he knew one of two things was going to happen. Maybe he knew that either he comes forward and he's going to go in WITSEC. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, they get to him first. So he's probably under a lot of pressure leading up to when this was going to happen. There's probably like a date or a time and place. Maybe it was in the Punchbowl.
That's where I'm thinking he doesn't think something. I'm leaning more towards he knows he's going into WITSEC at a certain time.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a man who's getting his affairs in order, and because when you read about him and his friends talk about him, he doesn't seem unstable until all of a sudden you're like, all right, a month before this incident, he's pointing a loaded gun at his head and screaming at his wife on the freeway. All of a sudden, these changes start occurring. So he must have, something happened, or he came across something, and he's working with federal government, and he's preparing to go into WITSEC to basically out all of this. And his way of doing that is basically what would look like someone who's about to commit suicide.
Now, what if before WITSEC, maybe he had to go to this location in the Punchbowl, there had to be one final meetup to get the evidence they needed, and something went south and they shot him.
I think that could be too.
Maybe he never
he was
made it
wearing
to
a wire and he was going to meet somebody.
Yeah, maybe they're like, all right, we need you to go do this one more thing, then we'll have the evidence we need. You can go to WITSEC, these people go to jail, and then he goes there and maybe they were tipped off and shot him.
I think that's very possible based on the testimony of those witnesses, like that biker lady,
Yep.
From the Outlaws and the other people. So I think there's a lot to unpack, and I feel like this Hager guy got too close, and lucky for him,
he didn't end
just
up
got fired.
In Punchbowl as well.
Yeah, he just got fired, and it'd be interesting to see if, like you hear about these people who claim to have told them that they knew where the body was and they knew this, and they reported it to these cops and nothing ever came of it. Is it because they buried it?
Yeah. Well,
so
yeah, that's interesting. Out of all the cases we've done, I think this is the first case where I don't think there's any reason to believe that the wilderness caused this guy's disappearance.
Oh, absolutely not.
Every other one of our cases, there's always been kind of a part of me that thinks, well, maybe they could have fallen, attacked by a bear or some kind of predator or exposure. But in this case, I don't think the Punchbowl had anything to do with this other than he was there at a specific time for a specific reason, and now he's missing.
Yep. No, I 100% agree.